Assalamu alaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh, and welcome back to another episode of Jumah Nights. As we mentioned, this is going to be our final episode with regards to the concept of Bara'ah, and we'll be speaking about Bara'ah in our thought processes and in our methodology. Secondly, we're going to be speaking about Sunni Shia debates online for our Jumah reflection section, and we'll be discussing the first part in quite a bit of depth. So without further ado, let's get straight into it. People seem to have this misunderstanding that Bara'ah and Tabarrah is about sending hate or sending la'na or sending insults on a specific individual, right? This is a misunderstanding that we have, and we have boxed the concept of Bara'ah into these categories of sending la'na, of sab, and insulting individuals. But this cannot be further from the truth. In reality, none of these are Bara'ah in itself. These are just manifestations of Bara'ah. In some cases, we find people that are sending curses and insults day and night. And sometimes there may be people, and we may tend to look at them and say, wow, he's got a really high level of Bara'ah. But sometimes we can see that that couldn't be further from the truth. Because that same person who's sending la'na day and night upon the enemies of Ahlul Bayt, he's insulting them, he's calling them names, he's doing the most that he can with regards to la'na and sab. But in his methodology, in his worldview, in the way that he thinks exactly in the same way that the enemies of Ahlul Bayt thought. So is this person fulfilling Bara'ah? Of course not. The concept of Bara'ah, and at its foundational level, is to have a level of disassociation with regards to our ideology, with regards to the way that we think and the way that we perceive things, and the way that we follow the method of Ahlul Bayt alayhi salatu wasalam is contingent on not following the path of their enemies. So when this person is the same as the enemies of Ahlul Bayt in their principles of belief, in their understanding of the religion and its aims, in their understanding of the tafsir of the Quran, you ask yourself, what's the point of all this la'na that this person is sending? So we're going to discuss this concept in a number of points. Number one, what is Bara'ah at its foundational level? Number two, how is Bara'ah misunderstood from its foundational aim? Number three, the importance of Bara'ah. And number four, what can we do to increase in the Bara'ah that the Imams want from us as their Shia? We find in a narration by Imam Rida alayhi salatu wasalam, which I'm reading for you from Bihar al-Anwar, from the 27th volume. Imam Rida alayhi salatu wasalam, he says here that Kamaluddin, the perfection of religion, is our wilaya and Bara'ah from our enemies. What did we speak about in our previous episodes with regards to the completion of the religion and the day that it was completed with regards to Ghadir? And we mentioned that Imam Sadiq said in a narration in Al-Kafi that he said, whomsoever wishes to complete Iman, then he should say, and he said the sentence, القول مني في جميع الأشياء قول آل محمد فيما أسروا وما أعلنوا وفيما بلغني عنهم وفيما لم يبلغني. He says that the Shia who wishes to complete his faith, he wants to complete Iman, he should say that my saying in all matters is the saying of Al-Muhammad, in that which they kept a secret, and in that which they declared, and in that which has reached me from them, and that which has not reached me. So the Imams have made it clear that the completion of Iman and the completion of religion is to have the wilaya of the Ahlul Bayt and to have enmity and disassociation from their enemies. And this layer of the narration that we mentioned of Imam Sadiq, it shows that it is very important in our wala to the Ahlul Bayt that we have the same opinions, and our saying in all matters is their saying. And we share their opinion in everything that we have in our lives, in our principles of understanding our religion, in the understanding of jurisprudence, in the understanding of the Quran and tafsir. Right? Everything needs to be in line with the Ahlul Bayt alayhi salatu wasalam and needs to be away and far from their enemies. And as we mentioned in the previous episode, Iman is composed of three things: belief in the heart, what you say on your tongue, and your actions. Right? And as we mentioned also, that it is the belief that will translate into what you say on your tongue and the iman of your limbs, right? So that is the root of the faith, that which you believe in your heart. And here it is the same. The root of Bara'ah is with regards to our belief in our hearts, the worldviews that we hold, the thoughts and the understandings that we hold with regards to Ahlul Bayt, and the worldview that we hold that is in line with their teachings and away from their enemies. If we take the example of Ziyarat Ashura, which we did in the last episode, but we take these lines here and we ponder about them. The Imam says, Allahumma al'an awwala zalimin zalama haqqa Muhammadin wa ali Muhammad wa akhira tabi'in lahu ala dhalik. He says, O Allah, curse the first oppressor that oppressed the rights of Muhammad wa al Muhammad, and those who followed him, the last of them who followed that first person in oppressing the rights of al Muhammad. Right? Here we can see that he's cursed those who have taken away the rights of al Muhammad. But we see the explanation of what they have done in other lines of Ziyarat Ashura. Let's carry on reading. In another part of the Ziyarah, the Imam says, وَلَأَنَ اللَّهُ أُمَّةً دَفَعَتْكُمْ عَنْ مَقَامِكُمْ وَأَزَالَتْكُمْ عَنْ مَرَاتِبِكُمُ الَّتِي رَتَّبَكُمُ اللَّهُ فِيهَا. He says that may Allah's curse be upon a nation who have moved you from your positions, and they have taken you out of your ranks that Allah has placed you in. Right? So this is one of the forms of oppression that those oppressors have caused on Ahlul Bayt alayhi salatu wasalam, and have taken away from their rights, moving them from the position that they are in and taking them out of the ranks that Allah had given them. So if we take the first segment of that, where he says, وَلَأَنَ اللَّهُ أُمَّةً دَفَعَتْكُمْ عَنْ مَقَامِكُمْ, those who removed you from your positions. Of course, here this has many layers, right? The physical positions of the Imam, the political layer of the Imam that was taken away from them by the people of their time, those who oppressed the Imams of Ahlul Bayt alayhi salatu wasalam. But here, let's go a step further and look at the depth of this statement. Let's take another angle with regards to the position of the Imam. What is the position of the Imam, or rather, what is the position of the Imam that should be in our minds, right? The position of the Imam that should occupy our minds is the highest position of our minds, rather the only position in our minds. As we spoke about in the episode with regards to the era of Ta'wil, we found that the Imam actually becomes the foundation of the religion, the only asl of the religion. Some people like to say that Imamah is not a fundamental part of our religion. It is just a principle of our madhab, right? They do not accept it as a foundation of our religion. Then the question asks itself, why did Allah say in Surah Al-Ma'idah in verse number 67 after the Basmala, He says, يَا أَيُّهَا الرَّسُولُ بَلِّغْ مَا أُنزِلَ إِلَيْكَ مِنْ رَبِّكَ وَإِن لَمْ تَفْعَلْ فَمَا بَلَغْتَ رِسَالَتَهُ. Oh, my messenger, reveal and proclaim that which has been revealed to you from your Lord. And if you do not, then it is as if you haven't delivered the message altogether. And Allah says in the end of the ayah, إِنَّ اللَّهَ لَا يَهْدِي الْقَوْمَ الْكَافِرِينَ. Indeed, Allah does not guide a group of people who disbelieve. Disbelieve in what? In the religion. Of course it's the religion. Because Allah says in the ayah of Surah Al-Ma'idah, the third verse of Surah Al-Ma'idah, He says, بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم اليوم أكملت لكم دينكم وأتممت عليكم نعمتي ورضيت لكم الإسلام دينا. On this day I have perfected your religion for you. Right? So He has perfected the religion through the wilayah. So how can the imamah not be a foundation of the religion? How can it not be the asl of the religion? Is this not taking the imam out of the position that Allah has placed him in the Quran? Right? So when we look at these lines of Ziyarat Ashura, we need to really think about them deeply, right? How do we need to place the Imam in the position that he should be in? Sometimes in our lives, we take something that's so important, we put it at the number one priority in our minds, be it our career, our family, our friends, or anything else, right? A scholar even, right? Sometimes we're taking someone or something to be so important that we place it subconsciously above the priority that we give to the Imam of our time, right? So, for example, in the world that we live in today, right, there are many ways in which someone could go and study and to find out the best way in which they can serve their Imam. But instead of doing that, they're prioritizing their career or they're prioritizing their friends, right? You can see here that there is a problem with regards to these thoughts in which we are not able to place the Imam as our number one priority, right? That is a surface level or one layer of actually taking the Imam out of the position in which Allah has placed him. So now some of us may actually sit here and send la'na all day. We might say, may Allah curse. We might recite Ziyat Ashura very regularly. But if the Imam is not in the position that he needs to be in our hearts, in our minds, and in terms of the priority that we give him, then what's the point of all of this la'na that we send? Does it not then become useless? This is why the bara'ah in our thought processes, in our world views, is the most important. If we move on to the next line, the Imam says, وَلَعَنَ اللَّهُ أُمَّةً قَتَلَتْكُمْ وَلَعَنَ اللَّهُ الْمُمَحِّدِينَ لَهُمْ بِالتَّمْكِينِ مِنْ قِتَالِكُمْ. He says, and may Allah's damnation and curses be upon a nation who killed you. And may Allah's curse and damnation also be upon those who set the foundations for this matter to occur. The Imam says those who killed you and those who set the foundations for you to be killed. Let's take a moment and contextualize that to the Imam of our time and what we are doing and our situation right now. The Imam of our time, Imam al-Hujjah, today, as we speak, requires us and wants us to prepare for his reappearance, for his victory, to make sure that the promise of Allah is achieved. The Imam expects us to be preparing for his reappearance, to be preparing the foundations for his reappearance. So let's ask ourselves that question today. Let me ask myself as Muhammad, am I preparing for the foundations of the reappearance of my Imam? If not, then what am I preparing for? Are we acting in a way that when the Imam comes, we have prepared a foundation for him to have victory? Or are we preparing in a way that we are preparing the foundation for the Imam to be killed? That is a really deep question that all of us need to ask ourselves, right? Here, when the Imam is cursing the people that set the foundation and paved the way for Imam al-Hussein to be killed, this includes people who planned for this to happen and also for those who didn't do anything to stop it. They paved the way for that to happen. And the Imams want us to ponder as much as we can about these ziyarats, about the words in these ziyarats, to ensure that we are not from those people that are preparing the foundation for our Imam to be killed. When we look at the narrations about the dhuhr of the Imam, we find a group of Shia that will actually go and fight the Imam of our time alongside false scholars and reciters of the Quran in Kufa. And these narrations, they refer to them as Batriya. The word Batri, it refers to those who mix the worldview of the Ahlul Bayt and the enemies of Ahlul Bayt. We have a narration that we would like to go through in Rijal al-Kashi. We find a narration on page 173 of Rijal al-Kashi, narrated by Sadir. He says, I entered upon Abi Ja'far, Imam al-Baqir alayhi salatu wasalam. وَمَعِي, he says, دخلت على أبي جعفر عليه السلام ومعي سلمة ibn Kuhayl. Yeah, this is the name of a person. I entered upon Imam al-Baqir and with me was Salama ibn Kuhayl wa Abu al-Miqdam Thabit al-Haddad wa Salim ibn Abi Hafsa wa Kuthayr al-Nawa or Kathir al-Nawa. This read both ways. Some people read it as Kuthayr al-Nawa and some people read it as Kathir al-Nawa. But I believe that the correct reading is Kuthayr al-Nawa. And he says, وَجَمَاعَةٌ مَعْهُمْ, and a number of people with them. And he says, وَعِنْدَ أَبِي جَعْفَرٍ أَخُوهُ زَيْدِ بن Ali فَقَالُوا لِأَبِي جَعْفَرٍ. He says that Imam al-Baqir at this time, he was with his brother Zayd ibn Ali. And these people that I came with, they said to Abu Ja'far, they said to Imam al-Baqir, نَتَوَلَّى عَلِيًّا وَحَسَنًا وَحُسَيْنًا وَنَتَبَرَّأُ مِنْ أَعْدَائِهِ. They said that we ally with Ali, Hassan and Hussein, and we dissociate from the enemies. So the Imam replies, it says, قَالَ نَعَمْ. He said yes. So he's in approval of what they have said. And then they said, نَتَوَلَّى فُلَانًا وَفُلَانًا وَنَتَبَرَّأْ مِنْ أَعْدَائِهِمْ. He says that we also ally ourselves with Fulan and Fulan. As we have mentioned in previous episodes, Fulan and Fulan, it refers to the first and the second caliphs of the Muslims. They say that we also ally with the first caliph and the second caliph, and we also disassociate from their enemies. So the narration carries on to say, قال فالتفت إليهم زيد بن علي. So Zayd ibn Ali looked towards them, وقال لهم, he said to them, أتتبرؤون من فاطمة? He says that, are you disassociating from Fatima? When you say that we are disassociating from the enemies of the first caliph and the second caliph, the enemies of them is Sayyidah Fatima. Are you disassociating from Sayyidah Fatima? He says, بَتَرْتُمْ أَمْرَنَا بَتَرْكُمُ اللَّهِ. You have mixed up and you've cut up between our affairs. May Allah mix you up and cut you up. فَيَوْمَئِذٍ سُمُّوا الْبَتْرِيَّةِ. And from that day, they were called the Batriya. So these people, they were called Batriya, those who mix up and cut up ideologies, because they used to also praise and ally alongside the enemies of Ahlul Bayt, while still claiming that they were allied with the Ahlul Bayt alayhi salatu wasalam. But when we look at the narrations with regards to the Shia in Kufa, who are described as Batriya and those who will fight against the Imam of their time, is it possible, do you think, that they will be these kinds of people that will also praise the enemies of Ahlul Bayt? Or is there another layer to their battle? Because it's very clear that in the Shia circles today, this idea doesn't really exist, whereby there are people that are actually praising the enemies of Ahlul Bayt in great numbers, and scholars that are actually doing that. Because in the narrations where we find that they fight against Imam of our time, it mentions 16,000 scholars, for example, or it mentions the Qur'an of the Quran at the time and the Shia that are with them, of course, right? So these are large groups. So when they are called Batriya, what is this referring to? Is this referring to the Batr that we just read about in Rijal al-Kashi, whereby they will be praising the enemies of Ahlul Bayt, or is this another layer of Batr? If we take a look at a narration from Imam Rida, I'm reading for you from the 72nd volume of Bihar al-Anwar, and this narration originally is found in Sifat al-Shia by Shaykh al-Saduq. He narrates a narration from Imam Rida where Imam Rida says, إِنَّ مِمَّنْ يَتَّخِذُ مَوَدَّتَنَا أَهْلَ الْبَيْتِ لَمَنْ هُوَ أَشَدُّ فِتْنَةً عَلَى شِيعَتِنَا مِنَ الدَّجَّالِ. He says, there are those who claim, or they say that they have our mawadda, they have the love of Ahlul Bayt, and they are actually a greater fitna and a greater tribulation for our Shia than the Dajjal. So he's placing a lot of emphasis on this, right? So a greater tribulation for our Shia than the Dajjal, right? So these are people that are going to confuse our Shia. He's saying, فَقُلْتُ يَبْنَ رَسُولِ اللَّهِ بِمَاذَا? The companion asks Imam Rida, O son of Rasulullah, and how would that be? How can it be that someone that loves you Ahlul Bayt or claims to love you Ahlul Bayt is a greater tribulation for your Shia than the Dajjal? The Imam explains, he says, بِمُوَالَاتِ أَعْدَائِنَا وَمُعَادَاتِ أَوْلِيَائِنَا. By showing an affinity towards our enemies and showing a level of distaste towards those who ally with us. إِنَّهُ إِذَا كَانَ كَذَلِكَ اختلط الحق بالباطل واشتبه الأمر. He says, and if that was to happen, then the truth, the haqq, would be mixed with the falsehood, and the amr, the affair, would become unclear. فَلَمْ يُعْرَفْ مُؤْمِنٌ مِّن مُنَافِقٍ. So the mu'min would not be known from the one who is a munafiq, right? So here, in this narration, when it's speaking about those who are a greater tribulation upon the Shia in the end of times than Dajjal, it is clear that they are referring to the same Batriya, those who mixed between the worldviews of Ahl Bayt and the enemies, as were mentioned in the narrations about the scholars and the Qurra and their Shia who will go and take swords and fight the Imam of our time. And here it mentions that these people, they will have an affinity towards their enemies and a distaste towards those who believe and are allies of the Ahlul Bayt alayhi salatu wasalam. So here we can see that they have mixed in their worldviews, right? It's the worldviews that they have mixed and they've confused the Shia with them. And here, this is specifically referring to those who have the power to misguide. As a Shi'i, who are you going to be misguided by? Who has the greatest power to misguide you? If a Wahhabi, for example, scholar comes and he tells you to fight the Imam of your time, you're not going to listen to him. You don't care. He's a Wahhabi, right? You're going to say, I don't have anything to do with this guy. I'm a Shi'i, right? So the people that have the most influence on you are the people within your own circles. The people that claim the love of Ahlul Bayt alayhi salatu wasalam, and those who have the power to influence you, those who have knowledge, those who are referred to as scholars. And that's why in that narration it speaks about 16,000 scholars, fuqaha of the religion, that will misguide the Shia at that time and take them to take up swords against the Imam of their time. And because of this, it becomes very easy for these laymen to take these false scholars as their guides, and they will end up following them into fighting the Imam of their time. And this is why we find in the narrations of Ahlul Bayt alayhi salatu wasalam, there is great emphasis upon ensuring that we do not place anybody above the Imam of our time. As I mentioned earlier, right, in our minds, what position does the Imam occupy? Does he occupy the highest position? And if not, then this is a problem in our belief. This is why the Imam warns very severely with regards to placing someone in your mind above the Imam of your time. We find a narration in Ma'ani al-Akhbar by Shaykh al-Saduq alayhi rahmah. Sufyan ibn Khalid narrates from Imam al-Sadiq alayhi salatu wasalam, where Imam al-Sadiq says to him, Ya Sufyan, iyaka wal ri'asa, fama talabaha ahadun illa halak. He says that, O Sufyan, beware of leadership, because no one searched for leadership except that he was destroyed. So Sufyan ibn Khalid responds to the Imam. He says, فَقُلْتُ لَهُ جُعِلْتُ فِدَاكَ قَدْ حَلَكْنَا إِذًا لَيْسَ أَحَدٌ مِنَّا إِلَّا وَهُوَ يُحِبُّ أَن يُذْكَرْ وَيُقْصَدْ وَيُؤْخَذُ عَنْهُ. He says, O son of the messenger, in that case, all of us are destroyed, because there is none from us except that he likes to be mentioned, and he likes for people to approach him and for people to take knowledge from him, right? Because the Imam said, beware of leadership, right? So he's saying leadership, well, all of us love to be leaders. We love for people to come to us and to ask us questions and to mention us and to, take knowledge from us. The Imam says, لَيْسَ هَيْثَ تَذْهَبْ. He says, it's not as you have thought. You've misunderstood what I'm saying. The Imam says, إِنَّمَا ذَلِكَ أَن تَنْصُبَ رَجُلًا دُونَ الْحُجَّةِ فَتُصَدِّقُهُ فِي كُلِّ مَا قَالَ وَتَدْعُ النَّاسِ إِلَىٰ قَوْلِهِ. So the Imam said that you've misunderstood what I've said. What I'm speaking about actually is أن تنصب رجلا دون الحجة, for you to choose somebody other than the hujjah of the time, the Imam of your time, فتصدقه في كل ما قال, so that you believe every single word that he says and you believe him to be truthful. وتدعو الناس إلى قوله, and you call the people towards that person instead of you calling towards the Imam of your time. You see, this is the ri'asa and the leadership that the Imam warns against. Make sure that you're not from the people that are calling towards a person other than the Imam of your time. That you've made him the priority in your mind. You have a scholar in your mind specifically, and you're saying, this scholar is so important that I need to bring everybody towards him and his opinion, right? And you're putting him subconsciously above the position of Ahlul Bayt alayhi salatu wasalam. This is what is dangerous. This is the kind of attitude that will lead to the people in the ends of times, the laymen following false scholars and taking up arms against the Imam of their time. This is what causes that. This is what the Imam is warning against. And this is something that we need to take very seriously, ensuring that the Imam is our number one priority in everything that we do, in our religious thoughts and our worldview. With all this in mind, this gives us more context and an understanding of all those narrations speaking about the importance of Bara'ah. We have the narration of Imam al-Sadiq alayhi salatu wasalam, when a person comes to him and he says, there's a person who loves you a lot, but he's weak in his Bara'ah. He's weak in his disassociation from your enemies. And the Imam says, hayhat. He says, no way, never. The person who claims to love us and he doesn't have Bara'ah from our enemies, he's a liar. He says there's no way that you claim to love us and you don't have disassociation from our enemies. This is showing us another layer of that. When we look at the importance of Bara'ah now, with all that we have discussed, it shows such an important level of Bara'ah that we need to have in our minds, such that we are able to have that in our thought processes and in our worldviews. And you can see that without this level of Bara'ah, we can end up being from those who actually fight the Imam of our time, with a level of better in our worldview, with a level of following people in and putting them in the position of the Imam of our time. That can end us in a position where we've actually stood in front of the Imam of our time and we have stood against him. Then we have the narration of Ibn Abi Umayr from Imam Sadiq alayhi salatu wasalam, where he says that the person who claims to know us and to recognize us and to have our ma'rifah and holds onto a rope other than us, then he's a liar as well, right? You see here, the Imam is making it clear that this is about worldviews. This is not about what you say on your tongue. You can have bara'ah on your tongue all you like. You can say, I disassociate from this person and this individual and that person. But if we are like them in our thoughts and in our worldview, then there is no point of that la'na on your mouth. Because the roots of bara'ah is in our worldview, in our thoughts, in our aqidah, right? And that is what should follow through into what you say on your tongue and the actions that you take. That's the form of bara'ah that the Imams want from us. To have it on a mental level. To have that in our worldviews, right? To ensure that we are sticking completely to the opinions of Ahlul Bayt and their methods of thinking about the religion. And this is something that is a very important thing to me personally as well. I feel like sometimes I find it very difficult in the world that we live in and in the times that we live in, with all this information coming out on social media. It's very hard to keep a balanced and a tunnel vision with regards to the opinions of Ahlul Bayt and ensuring that we reflect the opinions of Ahlul Bayt in everything that we think and in everything that we do, and ensuring that they are the priority in our minds. The Imam of our time is a priority at the top of our minds. That is something that all of us struggle with, right? And that is the highest level of bara'ah that we should all aspire to. And we can only do this by familiarizing ourselves with the worldview of Ahlul Bayt alayhi salatu wasalam, with their narrations, and also familiarizing ourselves with the worldview of their enemies and the path of shaitan. And we need to ensure that after having recognized and identified that path, we stay as far away from it as possible and we stick to the path of Ahlul Bayt alayhi salatu wassalam. So that when we read these lines in these ziyarats, when we say silmun liman salamakum, harbun liman harabakum, we have this level of bara'ah in our minds as well as on our tongues and in our actions, inshallah. So for Jumah reflections this week, we want to speak about Sunni and Shia debates online, right? There's a lot to unpack, of course. We've all been there. Like I said, and I've been saying in my previous episodes, I've spent my fair share of time on Twitter. Most of you that know me will remember all those debates that we used to have when we were younger. And obviously you'll also know that I've moved away from that, along with the people that I'm close with, from having debates on Twitter about Sunni and Shia polemics and stuff like that. The thing is, with Sunni and Shia polemics, is something that's so attractive as a teenager, right? You're in school, you're 13, 14 years old, and this is the point in time where now Muslims, they're super aware of their sect and what they believe and stuff like that. And there's people asking you, oh, are you Sunni or Shia? Or you go to the prayer room and you're praying, and you know, people see that you're Shia, you've got the turban out, you've got your hands out, and then people start arguing with you, right? And then suddenly you're like, in your mind, okay, cool, I need to research this, I need to make sure that I can respond to these people that are speaking against my faith. And you will go on a long journey of YouTube videos, and you'll watch like these Salafi da'wah people, you'll watch other Shia people, you'll watch debates, you might be even watching Speaker's Corner debates with Sunnis and Shia, and you're thinking, okay, cool, I need to make sure that I'm 10 out of 10 on this, right? And then what that develops into is that everybody is at that age kind of thing, 14, 15, you're really interested in Sunni Shia polemics, and then you want to reflect that online. You see a post, for example, and you want to respond to it. You want to respond with evidences and proofs and stuff like that. Now, the thing is, looking into religion is a very a noble thing, right? And it's good to have interest in why your religion is correct, and have faith and conviction, and to also, like, you know, read up more about other sects and ensure that you know what your responses are as a Shia for what you believe. So it's good to know what your beliefs are as a Shia and to be able to respond to other people from other schools of thought. However, we have to make sure that we don't let this take over our whole understanding of religion. This is something that I noticed about myself at maybe 17 or 18, right? I was so engrossed in Sunni and Shia debates and our points of disagreement that at that point I was so into the Sunni books that I didn't actually know as much about Shia books than I knew about Sunni books. And that's a position that a lot of our teenagers as Shia are actually in. So this is something that we need to make sure that we avoid, right? And we have the narrations from Imam Ali alayhi salatu wasalam. He actually speaks against searching for the religion through argumentation for the purpose of debating. So we need to make sure that we have that balance in our lives as teenagers. When we're looking at the religion, we need to make sure that we are as familiar with our literature, with our books, with the literature of the Imams of Ahlul Bayt alayhi salatu wasalam, and spending time doing that, as well as obviously going to look at your interests in polemics and Sunni and Shia debates. Another point to note is that a lot of the time these Sunni Shia debates, they're happening with teenagers, right? So a lot of the time both of these individuals will not be too well read, right? You might have a 15-year-old Shia who has spent some time on Discord, on Twitter. He's read a few narrations here and there. He's opened Bukhari, Muslim, and he's found some narrations that he feels that he can use against the other schools of Islam. But this same child now, he doesn't know Arabic, he doesn't know the principles of Hadith, he doesn't know anything other than the fact that he's able to find these Hadith in Bukhari and Muslim and use these to debate, right? But that is not a position that we want to be in, right? And this leads to a lot of arrogance as well from people at a young age, where they have engaged in so many of these debates with people from other schools of thought that they become arrogant, and that's almost part and parcel of polemics, unfortunately, right? And they begin to think that they know that everything, they have finished it all off. And then obviously, as part of growing up, you will very quickly learn that in fact you have so much more to learn, right? So just make sure that you're keeping that balance, yeah. When you're going to speak to an individual from the other schools of Islam and you want to debate with them, make sure that you have a level of humility within yourself to know that you probably haven't got the complete picture about all of these things, right? At the age of 15 or 16, right? This is something that you will learn to understand as you grow up, and as you familiarize yourself more with the literature of Ahlul Bayt, you'll be able to see with regards to the levels of mudarat and the understanding of dissociation and bara'ah in our literature, and you'll be able to enact that inshallah in practical terms. So I hope that's been a beneficial episode for you this week, and with that episode we complete our series on bara'ah. Next week we'll be moving on to a new series for the events of Arba'een of Imam al-Hussein alayhi salatu wasalam. And I hope to see you again next week. Stay tuned. Make sure you have subscribed to our YouTube channel and followed us on Instagram. I'll see you again next week. Wassalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.